Hey y'all, my name is Susan Sparks and I'm the senior pastor here at Madison Avenue Baptist Church in New York City. We are a diverse community brought together by faith. We hope that you enjoy our service today.
Good morning. My name is the Reverend Dr. Jennifer Harvey, and it is so good to be with you today. I want to tell you that it was just over 20 years ago that I found myself kneeling in a sanctuary where I'd had the incredible gift of serving on the pastoral staff of a church for about 5 years. And this was an incredibly diverse congregation. It was robustly multiracial. We had gay people and straight people. There were citizens and migrants and undocumented people, where there were 9 different languages. And there were millionaires in the community and people who were homeless and who were unhoused. It was a beautiful and very messy community. It just so happens that this was the sanctuary of Madison Avenue Baptist Church in the city of New York. And I was kneeling there just over 20 years ago because it was my ordination service. And so the community I was ministering with and to had created layers and layers of circles around me. And everyone was extending their hand to touch my shoulders or my head. Or they were touching the shoulders of someone in front of them who was touching my shoulders or my head. Or they were touching the shoulders of someone who was touching the shoulders of someone who was touching my shoulders or my head. You see what I mean? They were all laying their hands on me, circle after circle after circle. And then they began to pray. This was one of the most powerful moments of my life. We were ritualizing me being claimed, being charged to do the work of the kingdom of God. And this was a call that came to me through an eclectic, justice-committed, beautiful community. And since that moment, a lot has happened in my life. But in the many things that have happened, there's one thing that has remained central. And that has been my very imperfect attempt to continue to walk faithfully to that call that we ritualized together in that sanctuary on that day. And that's been especially true for me when it comes to race and justice, and specifically to what I am called to as a white US American Christian. In the last few years, I have been really wrestling in a focused way with how we're raising kids in this country and what we are all called to when it comes to race and justice and children. Which, by the way, I just want to say right up front, when I say we, what we are called to, I do actually mean we, as in all of us. You see, raising kids is a community question. It's a generational work. It's a congregational question. You don't have to have one or more of your own actual children. If you have ever seen a kid or a kid has seen you, you're helping raise that child. So the text seemed perfect today. Let the little children were being brought to Jesus in order that he might do what? That he might lay his hands on them and pray. So here's what happened when I started to dwell on that text. I found myself unable to stop thinking about precious moments. I don't know if you're familiar with precious moments or not. If I was here with you, I would ask and we would hear some sounds to see if folks were familiar with it or not. But I'm going to tell you, precious moments were those cute little white kids, mostly with big eyes. They were supposed to be angelic looking, if we assume angels are white. And you see, I grew up in a very large, very evangelical Baptist family. We had James Dobson's Bible Hour on the radio every Saturday and Billy Graham. And there were a few Harley Davidsons mixed in, which I think your pastor would like, but that's a whole different sermon altogether. And on a slow week in my family, we were at church like 4 or 5 times. Our house was full of Bibles and full of biblical imagery, and we had precious moment stuff all over the place. One of the figurines that we had actually had Micah 6:8 on it, our other text for today. And on the bottom of this figurine, it said, do justice and love kindness. And I'm pretty sure the figurine, this ceramic statue, was of a little kid who had fallen down and plop, he'd lost his ice cream off the top of his cone. And there was another kid who was leaning over and sweetly offering to help him feel better by offering him her cone. I know for sure that we had a Precious Moments Bible because the Bible was my sister's and I totally coveted it. Violating the 10 Commandments, I coveted this Precious Moments Bible. And my sister's Bible had an illustration of the let the little children come scene. And so there were all these cute little white kids. Maybe there were a few children of color in the mix, but mostly white kids. And they were all looking at Jesus and they had a sheep. The sheep was definitely white. And this is what I think of as Precious Moments Bible interpretation. God has shown you, O human, what is good and what is required. Do justice and love kindness and walk humbly. What does that mean? It means be nice. Share your ice cream. What does the kingdom of God look like? It looks like these sweet little, mostly white kids smiling up at Jesus while he pats them on the head. And there's a sheep. So I want you to think again about my ordination, that scene of everyone laying on their hands. And now about precious moments. These are totally discordant to one another. They conjure up very different kinds of Christianity, very different notions of what it means to be called to work for the kingdom of God. And I want us to think about that as we think today about who we are as church when it comes to our generational call, the long-term deep impact of what it means to try and respond to the call of the gospel. But before I do that, I have to confess something to you. I have two young children. They're not that young, 10 and 12 now. They would quibble with the words young, but I think they're young. And I have to confess that if I'm honest, I'm not really sure that I actually want my two kids anywhere near Kingdom of God talk. And actually, I don't think that's just a Jen Harvey confession. I'm not sure the church actually, collectively, the church really wants kids anywhere near the actual Kingdom of God conversation. What do I mean by that? Well, here's why I'm saying that. The kingdom of God is a time and a place where justice is simply the way things are, where peace is the norm, where all of us will have enough. Nobody will live in fear. Nobody will be victimized by humanity. Everyone will be included in our shared vision of flourishing. That's what Jesus was talking about when he talked about the kingdom of God and this being for children. The most beautiful description of the kingdom of God I ever heard happened for me when I had a colleague, Rabbi Baruch Halevi, come to my class of mostly Christian students. Very graciously, he came, and one of my students asked him, earnestly trying to understand the Jewish relationship to Messiah. My student asked Rabbi Halevi, so how will you know when the Messiah has come? And Rabbi Halevi looked at my students with so much love, and he said to them, oh, that's so easy. I'll know because I'll go out on my front porch early in the morning to bring in the newspaper, and there won't be one because there won't be any bad news to report. Isn't that beautiful? How much are we longing for that right now? Friends, I know we're living with so much bad news. And that vision that Rabbi Baruch Halevi gave to my students that day, that's the future I want for my own children, for all of our children. But the dilemma for me as a Christian, helping to raise children, is that bad news doesn't just go away on its own. A time where we don't need newspapers, sorry, my light just went off in my office. That day only comes if and because we've accepted the call to do justice and love kindness, to walk humbly. But we're only able to do that authentically when we're also facing and lamenting and challenging and living publicly together against all the bad news that's permeating our lives. And that's really hard. It's really hard. I long for the kingdom of God, but I really do struggle when Jesus says things like, injustice is so normal in human life that when we embrace kingdom values, it completely disrupts everything. Turns mothers against daughters, he says in this same gospel. I long for the kingdom of God to arrive, but I really don't love the part, I don't, where Jesus ends up executed because his vision is so counter to the powers that be that it just had to be silenced. Let's make it more granular for me. I long for the kingdom of God, but I really do tremble when I think about what it means to find ways to actually break ranks with racism, whether that's racism pouring out of the mouths of the most powerful political figures in our nation in different states, or whether it's coming out of the mouth of a coworker sitting right next to me. And man, if that's hard for me, again, I really resist passing any of that difficulty onto my kids. I just want to wrap them up and protect them from all of it. So I'm going to give you an example. I have a nephew who is African American. When he was about 5, a child in his class brought a bag of Doritos to school. This kid was letting all the other kids in the class come up and smell his Doritos. But then my nephew, my beautiful nephew, came up to him and the boy snapped the bag shut. And he said, no, not you. You can't smell them. You're Black. So I was really angry when my sister told me that this had happened to my nephew. But you know what my first impulse was? My first impulse was to not tell my 2 little white kids who were at the time about 4 and 6. My impulse was to cloak my 2 little children in the protections of white silence, not tell them this horrible story about what their cousin, who they are very close to, had gone through. Let the little children do what? Let the children hear that? Nope. I'm going to clean this up for them. Here you go, kids. I want to hand you some Precious Moments Christianity instead. I'm way more comfortable, if I'm honest, with share your ice cream than I am wrestling with what it means to let my kids in on the full call, to let them get anywhere near the kinds of things Jesus was in fact talking about when he made references to things like the kingdom of God. Actually, you know what? That means I have another confession. The other confession is that it's not really just about my kids. Turns out it's actually also really about me. See, my friends, I wouldn't be preaching truthfully today if I didn't take a very deep breath and acknowledge that telling the truth about bad news so that we can maybe someday live into a beautiful vision of no newspapers, it is a taller order right now for me, for all of us perhaps, than I think I've known in my lifetime. These days, I would way rather walk around talking about sharing ice cream. It turns out I'm as reluctant to go near the real gospel call in a world hurting like the world is hurting right now. I'm as reluctant to do that myself as I am to let my kids near it. And also, I don't think that's just a Jen Harvey confession either. I think the church is wrestling mightily with that right now too. I don't even need to list what some of the things are, but if I did, it would include naming Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, talking about a pandemic that has exposed how much profound lack of love for one another exists in our world, in our communities. I live in Iowa. It's pervasive here, especially when it comes to racial disproportionality and wealth differences and different citizenship status, what kinds of work people do, how we keep people safe. I'd have to name an insurrection that's now showing up in attempts to erode voter rights, all kinds of hard. What does it mean to face and lament and challenge those things? I just struggle. I'm struggling. I don't love it. It feels really adult complicated to be parenting in this context, to be living in this context, doesn't it? Let the little children come to me. Do not stop them, for to such as these, the kingdom of heaven belongs. The little children were being brought to Jesus in order that he may lay hands on them and pray. God has shown us, O humans, what is good and what is required of us to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly. What if it turns out it's actually not as adult complicated as I like to make it? Thankfully, I caught myself when I learned about the Doritos incident. I did end up telling my kids what happened to their cousin. And then I asked my children how they might have responded if they had been there. And you know what my then 5-year-old said? My child said, "Well, Mama, I'm thinking the kid that did that was probably a white kid. And if that kid was white, then I think another white person needs to tell him to stop. So I would have gone and said to that boy, 'Don't talk like that. That's mean.' Suffer the little children, for theirs is the kingdom of God." And one more story. This story happened when my students at Drake were organizing a protest, and I told my children that I was going, and they asked if they could come, which I said yes, and they asked if they could make signs, and I said sure. And so we went to this protest. This was about 6 years ago, and they participated with vigor, and they were physically present with African American and Latino and Latina people and other peoples of color and a few white people who were just standing together to say no more, enough. And my kiddos experienced adults asking them about their signs and affirming them for using their, at the time, 6 and 8-year-old voices. And that's how the story ended that day. But the middle of the story is where I learned something important about call. See, I walked downstairs to tell my kids it was time to go, and I literally lost my breath when I walked into the room and saw my older child's sign. My child's sign said, "Black Lives Matter. MATER. They matter the same as white. Stop killing them." And my little 8-year-old had put green stars and hearts all over this sign. And then below those words, "Stop killing them," she'd written the names of people in her life who she loves. Her sign said, "People that are Black," BLAK. T, she wrote out her cousin's name. A, she wrote out her other cousin's name. Toby, she wrote out the name of her aunt, my sister-in-law. And as you can imagine, I didn't just catch my breath. I literally felt my heart shatter when I saw this sign. But I realized something as I took in that devastating but gorgeous sign. I realized even back then that these were not days in which any of us should be dare living without a broken heart. Because if our hearts aren't broken, it means we've lost a core part of our humanity. And if the church isn't living with a heart broken wide open, especially in these days, we have actually lost our call. But as painful as that moment with my daughter was then, this is what I realized. I realized my daughter knew, she still does, that racism was a real thing with real consequences for real people. She knew some of her most beloveds were among those people. And so she too, like me, and she still is, was living with a broken heart. But I realized that the flip side of her heart being broken in the face of what is indeed heartbreaking is that she was still in touch with her humanity. She had the audacity to put her cousins' names on a sign because she knew already that we can and we must all live. She wasn't even tempted by precious moments Christianity. She was just going to go there with the truth. She knows the kingdom of God has nothing to do with clean, smiling white kids getting patted on the head by Jesus. She knew that it's about standing up for the lives of all of us together. In her not yet old enough to let it get adult complicated way, my daughter just reminded me that we will only get to where we want to be, a place where justice is simply the way things are, where peace is the norm, where all will have enough, where nobody lives in fear, where every one of us is included in a vision of flourishing by also naming and facing and lamenting, even when it's hard. She taught me that day that naming and lamenting is the same thing as knowing what it is to live and to love and to be beloved and to have beloveds. And what a gift. She'd already accepted her call. And in doing so, she actually had called me right back. She laid hands on me that day. So friends, there's nothing easy about the now. There's nothing easy about this gospel that calls to us. But when we touch and connect and lay hands on one another, when we do that week in and week out, whether in church or through electronic church on a screen, when we do it in messy, achy, gorgeous, eclectic community, we become continuously able to accept our call together. And when we do, we will be surprised by justice and love and healing showing up in the lives of our littlest ones. I would say, stop being mean, mama. And showing up in each and every one of our own lives. So Madison Avenue Baptist Church, the church that allowed me to hear and accept my own call. My prayer for you is this, that you will continue to minister in truth and fullness to one another and to the communities around you, and that you will also, each of you, allow yourselves to be ministered to by those around you. We need to be ministered to as well. And my prayer is that you will know in the very fiber of your being and in all the pieces of your beautiful hearts, even if they are, like mine is right now, broken in so many ways, that you will know that when we keep being together, touching shoulders, touching heads, touching shoulders, we are building a world. We are building a world where someday there will be no newspapers. I will be praying for you and with you. Amen.
Hello, beautiful church. It's Doug, your bass, singing at you in the basement in the Kips Bay neighborhood of Manhattan. Oh, for a world. This is hymn number 683. Won't you sing it with me now? Oh, for a world where everyone respects each other's ways, where love is lived and all is done with justice and with praise. Oh, for a world where goods are shared and misery relieved, where truth is spoken, children spared, equality achieved. We welcome one world family and struggle with each choice that opens us in unity and gives our vision voice. The poor are rich, the weak are strong, the foolish ones are wise. Tell all who mourn, outcasts belong, who perishes shall rise. Oh, for a world preparing for God's glorious reign of peace, where time and tears will be no more, and all but love will cease.
I hope that you remember that this is a community of faith in which you are always welcome and you will always be considered family. And until we see you again, please hear these words of benediction that's actually a Franciscan benediction that I think you'll enjoy. May God bless you with discomfort and easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships so that you may live deep within your heart. May God bless you with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people so that you may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless you with tears to shed for those who suffer pain, rejection, starvation, and war, so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them and to turn their pain into joy. And may God bless you with enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in this world so that you can do what others claim cannot be done. Amen. Thanks for joining us. Madison Avenue Baptist Church is located at 31st and Madison Avenue in New York City. Our website is www.mabcnyc.org.